Hey, how are things going?
Things are going. I just a bit distracted there. I've got 3 devices in my watch and trying to turn everything off. But no, I'm all right.
G'day, Jeanette. How are you? What a week it's been, Karen. I just was thinking we're on the 1st of October we move into new offices in the city.
Yeah.
I just finished off budget calculations for executive committee tonight, and we're at 110%, and that explains the look of weariness on all our face.
Yep.
I just got a new insolvency team starting in Sydney on the 1st of December, so I think we're just about burnt out, aren't we?
Oh, I'm trying to avoid that usage of words, but yeah, I'm getting pretty close. So I tell you what, on the upside, the sun is out, and that does help. So that's very inviting, and I think there is this, I guess, glimmer of optimism that, you know, as we approach warmer months, that there is some light at the end of the tunnel, that we can all be together more often and enjoy life a bit more.
Yeah, Karen, I looked at our wellbeing report because that's part of my job as a managing principal to report on it. And one of the things, I guess, that bothers me is this, that our level of psychological support is up. So there's 36% of our staff are accessing support, which is something that's a positive thing in our organisation, not a negative thing, I should say. But I think what we've realised, both you and I, is as we've adapted to lockdown and workflows have increased, we've lost the disciplines we had back at second lockdown in Melbourne, where we were very careful about separating family and work life. And I think as we speak to our clients, the same problems are rising. We're starting to work a lot harder again, and we're starting to drift in towards family life again. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think we just all are particularly fatigued. But on one hand, I think it's great that we're having a conversation about that as well, because we're not going to pretend this is not like an Instagram feed where everything looks, you know, glorious and, you know, we're winning all the way. We're certainly, well, for us anyway, more busy, but it doesn't make it easier. Yeah. But look, I think it's great, your message there around people at least feeling safe enough to be able to ask for some help. And I'm really glad that more broadly as organisations we can do that.
Yeah, and look, a lot of it's come out of the surveys that you've driven throughout the organisation that gives us both the mandate for people to be able to say, look, I do need a hand, but also some fairly rich data about how our people are doing. We've now done it over a 3-month period, and we have some real clarity about where the bumps in the road are, which has been great. Look, let's get on to talking about, instead of about our firm, which is a bit internal, isn't it, really? First major casual conversion case just came down 3 days ago with a 5-member full bench, and some of the major awards are now aligned with the National Employment Standard of casual conversion. I'm sorry we've been late in getting out the checklist for casual conversion, but it has been chaotic both at the Fair Work level and also industrially what is happening. What we have done, and Sophie, who produces our little video here, we'll get out to you today, is a flowchart and the checklist, but also Matt's contacts. So like what we're doing with these handouts now is giving you someone who's a ready reckoner. So you don't get lost, you can just ring them and go, I've got this award, does this one apply? And you don't have to spend money on it. You've got someone who just helps you through and navigate it, because it's not easy, okay? So that's the first thing. Sorry again for the delay. The other part is on mandating vaccines. I think you may have read over the last 2 days a significant federal government change where they are now recognising that mandating vaccines is absolutely going to be critical, not only in relation to a number of specific industries, but into the nature of work that is being undertaken by people. And through stealth, the Fair Work Ombudsman, who is trying desperately not to be seen as the mouthpiece of the federal government, has slightly changed their guidelines to move away from industry to the work people undertake, which is adopting the risk assessment process that Karen's been talking about for the last 2 months. And that's because Karen uses the law as a guide and doesn't make shit up. That's part of it. But, sorry. But it is nice to see the Fair Work Ombudsman at last looking through the lens of law rather than policy, and that will provide you with much better guidance than we've had 2 weeks ago. So they're my quick notes on that. I thought we might then swing into some cases, and it's a bit of me talking, but then we'll jump. Karen's got a bigger part to play, which all of you will be happier about. Safe work case, fascinating case came out in Queensland. Thanks so much. I'm back down. Yeah, I'm trying my best. I'm trying not to be Carl Stevanovic. I already had a couple of accusations of that because he's nearly as fat as I am. in Queensland, which is an aggressive litigator in safe work and has set up a specific litigation arm to manage safety incidents in 2019-20, prosecute an individual who was a carer in an aged care home in a particular area for high dependency people. There was a strict policy that said you can't leave the person unattended with the side rails down. He did. The resident fell. He picked him up, put him back in the bed, put the rail up, went home after the end of his shift. The next shift came in. This particular resident was unable to speak, but was clearly in terrible pain. They did an assessment, realised he was seriously injured, sent him off an ambulance, broken pelvis, broken leg. An investigation promptly found that the initial carer had failed to follow the policy. And not only was there disciplinary process that followed, the regulator got involved and he's subsequently fined $15,000 plus $1,000 court costs on the basis of breach of duty and failure to follow system. And I just think this is such a helpful case, don't you, Karen? Because what it does show, unquestionably, is if you have a good system, if it's known, understood, it's fair, it's had a good risk assessment sitting behind it, it's solid. It's not just being naughty when you breach it, it's a crime.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and it makes it very easy for you to act very swiftly to manage that, in terms of from a disciplinary point of view as well. But the thing with these type of processes and these policies, Andrew, is that they must be practiced and you must be consistent. Otherwise, they don't work for you and create more problems.
Yeah, and beware of the wheelbarrow full of policies which nobody reads. The idea of process around safety is that everyone can understand it. So that's no more safety acronyms that nobody reads or understands. It is about making them understandable, clear, and tying them back through risk assessment and risk discussion to the nature of the role the person's doing. And that's a discussion for the rest of today we're going to talk about. Mm-hmm. But I think that's one of the biggest problems around policies is nobody gets why.
Yeah. Remember, any system that we have, any policies that we have, whatever tools, resources we have, the objective here is that how do we help our people, whether managers, employees at the front line, whatever it is, understand what they're required to do properly, safely, most easily, okay, in that combination. Because if any of those kind of requirements there, you make it hard for people to understand what they need to do correctly and consistently. That's the bottleneck. That's what we need.
And the other end of that is when you don't do that, you've got condemnation, which means you can't punish people. So, look, interesting case, nothing special, but an interesting case that throws up a lot of the conversations we want to have for the rest of the day. Really interesting case that's come out of New South Wales Privacy Commissioner. You've heard me say before that each Privacy Commissioner is really a cat that sits there with a bowl of milk licking it and does nothing. Well, here's another case that proves I'm right. We hardly see any privacy cases. It's not like New Zealand where the Privacy Commissioner is actually a really aggressive, strong litigator who stops breaches of privacy. And I think that's disappointing, but it also shows that Australians are not as concerned about privacy as anywhere else in the world. Okay, and that's true. We've got Kendra who works for us, who's a specialist in privacy for startups and IP businesses. And let me tell you, in a startup IP business, privacy of data is everything, okay? So we're going to get there. But this case was about a company who had an employee and she went to Priceline in Camden and she stole some cosmetics. And she came back to work and she boasted about it. And the boss at her work went to see Priceline in Camden, who showed her the CCTV, and there was the employee stealing the cosmetics, went back, confronted the employee, told the employee to go back and apologise and pay. The employee did. But then the manager then showed a video that she had done of the CCTV on her mobile phone. The sacked employee then made a complaint to the Privacy Commissioner because obviously no one had told them that the Privacy Commissioner is a cat that sits and drinks milk and does nothing. The Commissioner published a decision which does nothing and said, in relation to the use of CCTV under Privacy Principle 6, that you can only capture personal information, which includes the image of a person, with your consent, thanks Vicky, for a specified purpose. The Priceline did it to prevent crimes being committed. So the actual capture of that and the manager coming to see them was all about a crime. So it was within a purpose, therefore it wasn't in breach of Privacy Principle 6. 11 says you can't give unauthorised access to that private information to another person. Again, to the extent that related to the commission of a crime, it wasn't unauthorised. But to the extent that the manager then used a mobile phone to video what was occurring, that was something which was not authorised. And that's the extent. Nothing happened, no punishment, no slap on the wrist. That's the end of the story for them. Interesting, the privacy commissions obviously haven't read the Surveillance Devices Act, because the use of a mobile phone for work-related behaviour without a person's consent in New South Wales is unlawful. It's not in Victoria. If Karen and I are having an argument in Victoria and I video her as a participant, I don't need her consent. But if Karen's having an argument with Sophie, which never happens because Sophie's the best producer in the world, but if she was, and I was to seek to video that in the work circumstances, that would be a breach of Surveillance Devices Act in Victoria. Both would be a breach of Surveillance Devices Act in New South Wales and Queensland. So I'm letting you know in privacy, be really careful, because in Surveillance Device Act, it's an offence, okay? One, and it is prosecuted. B, it prevents the admissibility of that evidence. And I guess that brings into question the use of mobile phones in workplaces of people doing things without their consent, particularly if they're doing something wrong, and then seeking to use it for disciplinary purposes. And I warn you, if you're going to do that, to talk to us quickly about how you use that and how you gain the consent to use that, okay? It's just a real warning that I want to put up there, okay?
Andrew, just on that, just because there was a lot there, what would have been the alternative in terms of when that employee was boasting around, stealing some stuff at Priceline? What should have been done?
The really simple thing was to just go to the employee and say, look, you've been boasting that you did this. You were dressed as an employee when you did it because she boasted she was doing. It's a serious matter. Tell us your version of what occurred. And if she said it didn't happen, well, then you'd go down to Priceline. You'd be allowed to look at it and you'd say, look, I'm satisfied that I saw you at Priceline. I'm happy to take you down and show you that CCTV so you can see it. That would have been a lawful way around it.
Yeah, good.
But the use of the mobile phone was unauthorised. As I said, it's sort of meaningless because the commission is going to hit you with a damn fish. So why not? All right. Next case is Farrick and Pendle Group. Really discreet little case all over again. Mr. Farrick had brought numerous applications to different tribunals in relation to the termination of his employment. He brought bullying applications. This was an adverse action complaint. It was an interlocutory stage in the federal court. Interlocutory means a decision to be made about something that's happening in the case. And what was happening in the case is there was an application to strike out the claim completely because it didn't disclose a proper cause of action. And what the judge said, a really good judge, by the way, said, look, the person raised a complaint around being bullied. Whether he's bullied or not, that's not the decision for today. We're just talking about the claim. It was a serious allegation of bullying, and you did nothing about it for a significant period of time. Now, that means he's exercised a workplace right, and you've delayed doing anything about it. You subsequently did, but during that period of time, that person alleges they suffered injury and detriment. That's adverse action. And I guess, Karen, you do many more investigations than me, but it's a constant problem, isn't it, that you're drawn in 7-10 days later and everybody's damaged by where we're up to.
Yeah, so I think here it's about, we've got a hazard. We're looking at it from a safety lens, Andrew. There's a hazard there, which means that there's a risk there. Now, depending on the severity of that risk as well, you've got to take it through that risk management process in terms of, again, what are the controls and manage it appropriately. So understand the employment part of it, but yeah, certainly from a safety perspective, you are compelled to actually do something and you're obligated to do something.
So Karen's point is perfect. So adverse action, you're in deep strife. And what this is saying is if someone raises a serious complaint, sexual harassment, bullying, you must investigate. Someone says, I'm not getting on well with Karen, you might conciliate. Do you know what I mean? But if someone raises a criminal breach, and let's face it, that's what bullying is, it's a breach of safety legislation, then you must take action and do it immediately. If you don't, you expose yourself to adverse action. But as Karen said, reasonable practicability says, what is the hazard? What is the level of risk that attaches to it? Well, we can only find out the level of risk and determine the controls by undertaking an investigation. So you must. Anyway, that's enough of that. All right, we're getting into the big ticket item, and we've gone 4 minutes over, Karen, which is me. So we're talking about mandating vaccinations. We've recently received a copy of a circular letter which has been published by some horned animal from anti-vax land that says you fill in the gaps and you give this to your employer saying why you shouldn't be vaccinated. There's many uses for that. If it's rated, you can use it in the toilet. But the bottom line is, it is something you need to be aware that people are downloading through social media. It's crap and it's easy to deal with, but it's being done, and it's repeatedly being done with our clients at the moment. So what we do around mandatory vaccination is really simple. 7 steps I'm going to throw to Karen then to dealing with the risk management part of it is, you have an obligation to consult if you're going to change in safety and in award-based, and that involves consulting individually with people around the risk assessment process. Karen will deal with that. The other parts that you need to look at going forward are, what's your pre-employment process? So you only employ people subject to legal exemptions who are vaccinated. What's in your terms of contracts should be in there, has to be in there. And remember, when you put in the vaccinations that are relevant and say among others, don't just stay, because we're going to have pandemics again in the future. It's not going to be new.
Or boosters or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Policies and procedures, what are you going to say about it? What is your lawful and reasonable direction? What are the structure of correspondence you're going to use around it? Okay, make sure that's all lined up with all of this. Focus on privacy. Now, we've got a register of here, which everyone has filled out, which says the vaccination status of everyone. You can almost always do this through discussions, but now with 3 clients, we've got people who are refusing to advise us whether they have been vaccinated. And once again, that goes back to the risk management process of saying to people, we can't provide a safe place of work for you. How about being mandated by Government Construction Works in Victoria? The answer is, Karen, once you've got a legal order, it's a lawful and reasonable direction, but the consultation requirements are the same. So that's like, you've got safety law that says you've got to be safe. That doesn't mean you don't consult, because safety law says when you change something, you must consult. So you still go through the risk assessment process. You identify what the risk is to the person, to the organisation, to the community. You set up a risk structure around it, and one of your controls say, well, the government mandates this, but here's the other controls that we need because vaccination doesn't prevent transmission. Okay, so vaccination is only one part of a thing. And the last part is know what the exceptions are and how we manage that, and build a risk profiling tool to deal with exceptions and how you will manage them. And if you can, you can't. Remember, under the Fair Work Ombudsman and risk exceptions, not everyone in an organisation has to be mandated. In fact, clearly they won't be if the risk assessment says they're not. So you need to go down to an individual level to actually achieve that process. I think that's enough. Nina has put together a pack on this. If you want to know more about mandating vaccines, just ask Nina. What we're trying to do in the group is create specialists so that you can go to them directly just to talk, not to spend money, just to talk and say, I've got this issue, what can I do? And Nina is going to be able to help you with that. Karen, over to your part, which I think is the most critical part, which is around the risk assessment process.
So getting a flurry of inquiries around this, Andrew, in terms of going down the risk assessment, the mandating vaccination pathway. So with that, we've spoken for several weeks now around the need to apply a risk-based approach. So what that means is that conducting a risk assessment. I've got here for you, and you probably would have received this already in the morning in the emails, that I've outlined 5 key steps for you to do this. So first of all, I've got, in terms of engaging with people around, objectively, but positively around vaccination, in terms of, well, why are we doing this? Why is this important? Tying this in, of course, with the obligations as an employer, but also to employees to be able to provide a safe workplace. So this is not some kind of, to be seen as some kind of ideological positioning from the organisation. There's good reasons why we do this. Reinforcing in terms of, or making clear organisationally what your position is in terms of responding and managing to COVID hazards and incidents as well. So, for example, part of what you say you are, or who you are, is that, look, we value safety and it's one of the most important things and we prioritise that. Yet you don't have a clear, coherent response or message around being proactive in that space, then there's a bit of a disconnect. So that's why part of this is a communications piece. So think about that thoughtfully. And that's also the reason why this is a leadership piece as well. Okay. Also, it's really important for your workforce to understand how the public health and client and community expectations are changing around vaccinations and how that's impacting your work. So you may already be getting resistance from clients or suppliers or whatever else in terms of not being able to come on site until, unless you can prove your vaccination status. So
Karen,
those issues are real. Yes, Andrew.
Can I just cut across you there? And that's the other issue. This isn't just about mandating vaccines for health-related issues. It's also the fact that for some people, it's going to be inherent requirements, their job, to go out and do marketing events, to go and attend other sites. And if they're not able to do that, and you're right, Derek, this is the funny thing. You've got to have acute fever injections to work with cows, okay? But people think you don't have to have a COVID injection to work with people. I mean, really? Anyway, look, sorry, Derek, you shouldn't have fired me up. Back to you, Karen.
Yeah, okay. So it's really what I'm trying to point out there is in terms of how does this impact in terms of our work and our people on a daily basis and the various different touch points that we have, rather than it becoming an ideological issue or political issue around should we, shouldn't we, and all that stuff. So after that, it's really applying the process in terms of the risk management process of identifying. So understanding across your workforce in terms of where the exposure points are. Now think about this on-site and off-site during hours in terms of work hours and off-work hours as well, okay? Because it's not like that anymore. It could be anywhere, anytime. Detect the regions, the sites, the teams, the roles, the activities that you guys are actually doing where there is a higher exposure to COVID risk. And therefore understanding also with that, well, what do we know are the barriers that prevent or discourage people from getting vaccinated? Now, there's several there, and I've just kind of put a couple of examples. It could be medical, it could be access, cultural, religious, political, whatever. But seek to understand, and that's why consultation is so important, because you can't do this behind a desk or with two people from the risk team trying to figure this out. You need to speak to people and across your workforce. Okay, with that, assess from there. Assess. It's a pretty. I probably won't talk too much about this, but there is a risk rating process that you've got. I'm sure you've got a risk matrix or methodology. But if not, we can help with that. But understanding that there's the actual risk versus the potential risk as well.
Karen, I'm just going to jump in because one of the things in my tirades that I've just had, I do want you to understand, everyone to understand, there are clear clinical conditions which are genuine exceptions, okay, who cannot be vaccinated. And the issue, which is an incredibly troubling issue at this stage, is it part of the inherent requirements of the job, given the assessment process you're doing, that they need to be protected and safe? But what I want you to understand is you're then throwing into discrimination law. So be really careful at this stage. They're your people, one, so you care for them. Two, there's discrimination law. So that assessment process must move into the next category of control to see how we can safely manage these people.
Yeah. So with that, Andrew, just touching on control then, in terms of applying the controls, that you're going to have different tiers and different types of controls based on the different levels of risk, okay, and the different types of work and all that. And that also includes understanding there perhaps might be groups of people or certain individuals where you can't actually, there is no suitable control. So you mentioned earlier in terms of how do you manage those exceptions as well. So that's where the work goes in that space. The last bit of it is reviewing in terms of continuing to engage and consult. You don't do this at the start. You go back to people and say, look, based on the feedback, based on what we've heard, based on our circumstances, based on the incident history, based on what we've known, based on all these directions, there's a lot you need to take in. All that, this is what we've come to. It's reasonable for us to mandate it. The only reasonable control we have that would have a widespread impact and improve the safety of our people and our customers and our community is this. And then you go down that pathway. But it is an ongoing dialogue, Andrew. But anyway, that's some stuff for you guys. I hope that's useful. And if there's, happy to talk to anyone.
And look, there's been some great stuff coming through about manufacturing being probably going to be mandated. Care workers and disability have been completely ignored, and just shows where the votes sit when those types of things happen. But this is a political discourse that's ongoing. And you're right, Michelle, there is such pressure coming to actually deal with this issue by government rather than leaving it to employees that something just has to change. We can't be left holding the basket. Okay, let's move on. This is great. Keep the conversation going. Let's go on to the problem, and Karen is doing the problem today.
Yes, I'm giving you a breather. I should just go on a mad rant. Anyway, so what we've got here is, and I can't see the screen. All right. So our case study, Jenny worked as a teacher at a private school. She was head of English for the middle school. Jenny was performance managing Peter, a second-year teacher who was employed on a yearly contract. Peter complained to the deputy principal, Mary, that Jenny had been making adverse comments about his performance to other teachers. Mary was renowned for her commitment to high standards of behaviour and seen at times as ruthless in protecting the standards within the school. Mary spoke with Jenny about the complaint, who said it was nonsense. That night, Jenny published a post on her Facebook account with high privacy settings. What the F? PWP, inept, hopeless and weak, goes behind my back to Prada Devil M. 2 other senior teachers made comments, lol, and she does wear Prada. He won't get a contract next year acting like that. Why doesn't P just pull up his socks and suck it up? You have tried your best with him, and this is what he does. Another slide. Peter is shown the post by a friend who is a senior teacher at another school and a friend of Jenny's on Facebook. He takes a screenshot and sends it to Mary, who appoints another deputy principal, Fiona, to investigate. The next morning, Jenny realises how unwise the post was and deletes it. Fiona asks Jenny about the Facebook post, who says, "You have no right to look at my Facebook." Jenny then shows Fiona her Facebook post for the last 3 days and says, there, are you happy? No posts about Peter.
I wrote this, you can tell.
Yes, anyway, doesn't matter. We'll keep moving. Anyway, Fiona shows her the photo of her post and her friend's response. Jenny denies they are real. Fiona speaks to the friends of Peter and to 2 other friends who work at the school, who are visible as friends of Jenny on Facebook, and they all confirm the picture of the post.
All right, so let's go to the poll. Hard problem this week. You'll be surprised. There's some nasty questions for you. And Robin, I think somebody asked about contract terms. Have a chat to Nina. Yes, we have got the package together, including the advice that sits around, and she can support you with it.
Alrighty. We've got more than half, Andrew.
All right, let's count to 10 and then let's go, because we're running out of time and this is a big set of questions.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
All right.
All right, so the first question is, was it unlawful in breach of privacy law to use and rely on Peter's photo of Jenny's post and comments from a high privacy setting Facebook? The answer is Jurassic and Director of Transport, which is privacy does protect social media posts, particularly with high privacy settings, unless you are fearful that in obtaining that information, the person may delete or damage it and hamper the investigation. So I guess the important thing to say about that is it is lawful and an authorised method both to review the Facebook site and to take a screenshot or photo of it, so it overcomes that privacy case we're talking about. So the answer is it is not a breach of privacy law and certainly not one which could be litigated safely. Did Jenny engage in serious misconduct? And I'll just have a look here so we can see how we spread out on that. Yeah, so there's a real mix there, isn't there? The answer is the serious misconduct is the lying.
Yes.
Okay, so, and all the case law says that if you lie deliberately, in this case, she destroyed evidence as well, she's definitely out on her ear. Based on the evidence in the case study, did Jenny engage bullying of Peter? Well, remember what bullying is. So that is repeated conduct. It is unreasonable in that it hurts, humiliates, or intimidates and creates a safety risk. 2 of the elements are made out, but on the evidence we have there's definitely one. There may have been a first one which we don't know about, but I don't think it's bullying. But that doesn't mean that it's not misconduct. Okay, I want to be clear about it. Bullying is a serious form of misconduct, but on the continuum of misconduct, what occurred here is clearly quite serious misconduct. And the last question is, if Mary did not have Peter's complaint around the Facebook post investigated, and subsequently he was not offered a contract for the following year based on Jenny's feedback about him, would he have a legitimate adverse action claim? What did we say here? I'm going to bring up what you said. So yeah, there's a general preponderance of thought that says it probably is an adverse action, and I agree with you. Raised a complaint, a workplace right. The behaviour that occurred towards him and her undermining of him in the broader school community is something which is adverse action. Okay, so remember, adverse action would go directly against the individual, but also against the school if they failed to investigate immediately and take action, which was Karen and my point earlier, the need for an immediate investigation. Guys, that's it. Big week, wasn't it? Next week, can I just say two things we're doing? We're going to have a lot greater clarity by government on mandating vaccinations, so we'll update you on that next week. And the last thing I want to talk about next week is body image and employment law. Recent case of a woman because of her size was terminated and the subsequent damage to her mental health. Really interesting case study. And given the change in people's body shapes, the diversity of people who are employed, this is a key issue in employment at the moment. And we really do need to talk about not looking at Instagram beauties for employment, but looking about capability and skill. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.